Welcome to Hacking with Python 12, Image of Scrapy bot. In this video, we'll be looking at creating a web image scraping bot with the Python 2 library Scrapy. Every video will have all slideshows and code available in the description. I'll be assuming you already have an understanding of HTML. Also, I assume you have a decent understanding of Python and object-oriented programming in Python. Having knowledge in XPath will be helpful. So what is this bot going to do? Our ultimate goal is to download all of the images on the front page of Imager.com. This means we need our bot to visit all of the front page gallery posts. We also want our bot to download all of the image posts and their titles. So what is Scrapy? If you watched the last tutorial, I went over it briefly. Scrapy is a low-level web scraping framework made in pure Python. It's lightweight and comes packed with an abundance of features. The Scrapy framework is really unique in the fact that it structures its projects in a package format, forcing an object-oriented approach. Okay, so let's have a quick look at the layout of a Scrapy project. The hierarchy is fairly simple to understand and manage. First, we have the project name. This project name is the root folder and the subfolder for the bot itself. Inside the root folder, we have the scrapy.config. This config file rarely needs to be altered because of the upcoming settings.py file. Inside the project name subfolder, each file is important. The init.py file doesn't have to be touched as it's there to set our package up for Python to interact with. We then have the items.py file. This is used to hold our Scrapy item objects, which we'll have a look at a bit later. We then have our pipelines.py file. This file contains the pipeline code we wish to use for our returned items from the bot. Then we have the settings.py file. This Python file is where we can set up any settings and config options we need for our Scrapy spiders and pipelines. Finally, we have the spiders subfolder. Inside this folder, by default, we'll just have an init file. However, this is where we create our code files to write our logic for our bot and the rules we place on it while it crawls the web. Okay, let's look at some keywords. Items, what are they? Item objects are flexible storage containers that can hold our scraped data. Next is spiders. Spiders are the logic for our bot. You can think of it as a spider decides how to spin and traverse its web. Then finally, the pipeline. The pipeline, at least for me, was one of the toughest parts to grasp when learning how to use Scrapy. The pipeline is the stage that all of our scraped data is passed back to before being output to file or to console. Here, we could filter out duplicates or make our own custom saving format, or even override inbuilt pipelines to change the functionality to what we need. We'll have a look at this later. Okay, now just quickly, what is XPath? XPath is an expression-based XML format navigation system. It allows for us to find and grab information from elements in an XML document. HTML files are actually in the format of an XML document, so Scrapy uses XPath to easier deal with finding information inside scraped pages. Onto our program. We are going to need to set up Scrapy first, which is quite the chore at the moment, as the version stored on the Ubuntu package list is a very old version of Scrapy, so we need to update our package lists, and we need to set the key that Scrapy is signed with. Then we'll jump over to writing our bot. Okay, so let's jump over to Ubuntu, and let's get Scrapy installed. So, first of all, we need to set our key that Scrapy is signed with, so sudo apt key adv dash key server hkp, and the server we want is the key server .ubuntu.com, and the port is 80. And we want a dash receive 627 220E7. Okay, and we run that, it'll ask us for our password. We're going to put in our password. There we go, and it'll go and it'll request the key from the server, and it'll grab it. And now we need to update our lists that apt get searches for. So we're going to echo and we're going to echo the string deb http / archive.scrapy.org /Ubuntu, and we want the Scrapy main, and then we're going to pipe this, so the vertical bar, which is shift \, we're going to pipe this into sudo t /etc /apt sources.list.d /scrapy.list, and we run this, and it'll echo it out into our, it should have echoed it out into our, did I do that right? I assume it's set up. Okay, and then finally we can install Scrapy. So sudo apt-get, we're going to update apt-get, and then we're going to run the command sudo apt-get install Scrapy -0.24, which is the latest version, or the version at the time of this video. We run that, it'll run through, and it'll get all of the packages and build all of the resources that we need. And this may take a little while if it's your first install of Scrapy. Okay, so that's done installing, and it's ready to go. Okay, so find a folder that you want to start your Scrapy project in, and we're going to type Scrapy, and if we hit enter, we'll get a list of commands we can use with the Scrapy command, and the command we want is the start project. So we do Scrapy start project, and then we give it a name. So let's call it Imiga, and we run that, and it'll create our project, and it gives us a little instructions on how we can get started. So okay, we're going to go into our project file now, so Imiga, and we can type ls to have a look what's in here. So as you can see, we got the subfolder Imiga and the Scrapy config. Now we don't need to do anything with our Scrapy config, as the defaults are fine for our use, and we're going to jump into the bot folder. So inside the Imiga folder, if we ls again, we've got our init.py, items, pipelines, settings, and then our spiders subfolder. So let's set up our items.py first. We want to create an item that we can store everything in. Okay, so let's vim items.py. Okay, now what we want is we want to set up all the things that our Imiga item holds. So we can get rid of this pass, and we can get rid of the comments there as well. Okay, now we want to store the title of the image that we scrape. So we'll create a variable called title, or an attribute called title, and this is going to be a scrapy.field. Okay, so we've created a scrapy.field. Okay, so we need to add two more attributes. Image underscore URLs equals scrapy.field. Now this image URLs variable is a special variable, and Scrapy will recognize it as an image URL attribute, and we'll use it to download our images. And because of this, we also need a variable to hold our images. So images equals scrapy.field. Okay, so these are our three attributes for our Imiga item. Okay, so let's save this and quit. And next we're going to edit our settings.py. So vim settings.py. Now we need to set up a few more settings for our bot. So we can keep our spider modules and our new spider module, but we need to add an item pipeline. So item underscore pipelines equals, and this is going to equal a dictionary. So each value in the dictionary, or each key in the dictionary, corresponds to a code file that holds a class. So we want to import the default images pipeline from Scrapy. So we want Scrapy dot contrib dot pipeline dot images dot, and then we want the images pipeline. Okay, and then :1 because we want to enable this pipeline. Okay, now we're going to need to set a path to store all the images that we download. So images underscore store equals, and this is just a string of a directory you want to store your files. So let's go with home, and I'll do my username, so Ubuntu, and I'm going to store it into a folder called Imiga front. Alright, and close the quotes off. Okay, so this is our settings setup. So we've told Scrapy that we're going to be using an images pipeline, and we've set where we want it to store the images. Now finally we can get on to writing our spider. So let's change directory to spiders. Now inside the spiders directory at the moment is just the init.py file. Now this is where we can create our own files. So let's vim, and we'll call it imiga underscore spider.py. Okay, now inside of our spider we're going to need to import Scrapy. So let's import Scrapy. Now to make things a bit easier, let's use the from keyword, and from scrapy.contrib dot spiders. So we're going to use an inbuilt spiders classes. So we're going to import the rule object, and we're going to import the crawl spider. Now the crawl spider is basically a rule using spider, which will use rules to pick out whereabouts it'll grab links from. Okay, so from Scrapy dot contrib dot link extractors, we're going to import the link extractor class. Okay, now we've got all of our Scrapy stuff imported. Now we need to import our Imiga items that we created earlier. So from Imiga, which is our project name, dot items, so the items file, we're going to import the Imiga item that we created earlier. Okay, so that's it for our imports. Now we can get on to writing our spider. Now a spider is a subclass of the crawl spider. So let's create a class, and we'll call it Imiga spider. And inside the brackets, we're going to make it a subclass of crawl spider. Okay. Now that we've created our crawl spider, we need to override some basic attributes. So first we must have a name. So the name attribute has to be unique to this bot, to this spider. So we'll call it Imiga because we're only going to have one spider. Okay, now we need to create a attribute called allowed domains. So allowed underscore domains, and this equals a list of domains. So we're going to only have one domain, which is the imiga.com domain. So we don't want our bot to leave the Imiga site. Okay, now we're going to have a start underscore URLs. So this is going to be the pages that our bot starts on. Now we're only going to start on one page because we only want to extract the front page. So http // www.imiga.com, and that will get the front page of Imgur. And make sure that these attributes are in lists. And finally, we're going to set up the rules attribute. Now our rules is going to take a list of rules. So we'll open up our list and we're going to create a rule object. So our rule is going to use a link extractor. And our link extractor is going to allow any links. So allow any links, and we're going to use a list. And we're going to allow anything that it has a / gallery / and then we're going to do a little regular expression on the end here, which is a **. So anything after the gallery, because Imgur uses a hashing algorithm to decide on what the name is of an image. Okay, so let's close that off. So we're only going to allow links with gallery something to be extracted. And with those links that we extract, we're going to give them to pass_Imgur. Now pass_Imgur is going to be a method that we create in just a second. So we've created our rules. Now let's define our pass_Imgur method. So def pass_Imgur, and this will take a self and a response. Now a response will be passed to it by a Scrapy. So the response is whatever the web page gives back to us. Okay, so now we want to create our image item, so our Imgur item. So we'll call it image, and that's going to equal an Imgur item. And now we're going to start setting some of the values inside that item. So let's set image title. And our title is going to equal the response .xpath. So we're going to use an XPath expression to extract some information from the returned response. So XPath, and we'll just bring it down a line so it's easier to read. And we're going to use the XPath expression // for relative. We're going to get relative h2 because the titles on the Imgur site are in h2, which we can have a look at if we go to the Imgur site. So if we jump onto Firefox and we go to imgur.com, and we can see we got this front page and it's got a bunch of image posts on it. And as you can see down the bottom left, we have the imgur.com / gallery / and then it's a random string of characters. Now if we actually go to a post, we get this sort of layout here where it's got the image, the title, and some comments. So if we right click and we go inspect element on the title, we'll see that we get this h2 ID is image title. And if we inspect the element of the actual image itself, we have an image tag and it has a source address for the image. Okay, so we can close Imgur off now. Now we want to get that h2 tag, and from that h2 tag we want to get the h2 tag that has an attribute of ID equals, and inside here we're going to have an image dash title. Okay, now we close off our square brackets there. So we're going to get a h2 element that has an attribute with the ID image title /, and we're going to get the text from that element. So text, and then we can close off our expression. And then once we've closed off our XPath expression, we want to extract the values, or the data from that expression. Okay, now we need to get the image. And when we download images with Scrapy, we need to get the URL and then store the URL, and then the Scrapy pipeline, the images pipeline that we set up, will download it for us. So the images, as we saw just before, are stored with a relative address. So let's grab the relative address. So rel equals response.xpath, and then we're going to get the / image, whoop, that needs to be in quotes, / image / and then we're going to get the @source. So we're going to get the source attribute from the image tag. Okay, so once we've got that, we can .extract that information. So that'll extract the relative link. And now we need to set up our image URLs. So our image, and then the code image _ URLs is going to equal a list of HTTP : close quotes plus the relative link 0. Okay, so we can close off that list now, and then we can return image. So that'll return the image item that we created. And this is our spider logic completed. So let's save this and quit, and let's give it a run. So to run our Scrapy bot, we need to go back up to the root directory. So cd back up. We need to do it one more time. So we're in the root directory, and the root directory is the one with the Scrapy config. Okay, now to run our spider, to make it crawl, we need to type Scrapy crawl and then the name of our spider, which was the name value that we used inside of our spider logic. So that name attribute. So we called it Imiga. So if we hit run, it'll start running our Scrapy bot, and as you can see, it's going off and it's starting to crawl pages, and it's grabbing images, crawling pages, grabbing images. It'll keep going. So I'll close this off just for the moment. Now, if we come over to our actual home folder, we have a Imiga front, which is where we stored our images. We can open it up, and it's stored in a folder called full. And as we can see, we get the images on the Imiga front page. So we can scroll through and have a look at them in our own time. Okay. So that's pretty neat. Let's jump back over to the slideshow. Now currently our bot is working and scraping images. However, at the moment, the image file names are being stored with Scrapy's inbuilt images pipeline, which stores the images as a SHA-1 hash hex result of the image's download URL. So because we want to store the images with their file names as the post title, we need to create a subclass of the images pipeline class and override the methods we need to set the file names differently. Okay, so let's get on to writing a custom images pipeline to save the images with custom file names. Okay, so let's jump back over to Ubuntu, and we're going to need to edit our pipelines. So let's change directory into our Imiga folder. Now ls, we can see we have our pipelines.py. So we want to edit that. So vim pipelines.py. Now inside of our pipelines.py, we'll get this sort of structure already made for us, which is the Imiga pipeline object and def process item, etc., etc. Now, because we're going to override a class that's already inside the Scrapy module, we need to import some things first. So import, we're going to import Scrapy, of course. Now, from scrapy.contrib.pipeline.images. Now this might be starting to look a bit familiar. We're going to import the images pipeline. Now you might remember this from our settings.py, where we set our dictionary to import this for us. Well, because we're going to override the class itself, we need to import it here to override. So inside here, we're going to create a subclass of images pipeline. So this images pipeline, we're going to create a subclass and start overriding its methods. Okay, so we have the Imiga pipeline now, which is going to be our pipeline where we do everything. let's define a couple of methods. So we're going to define our own method, which we're going to call set underscore file name. Now the file name is going to take self, as all methods should, and we're also going to take a response. Okay, now I'm just going to put a little comment here, so in your own time you can add a regular expression to check that the title is a valid title for a file name. Okay, now let's return. So we're going to return the file name. So we're going to return full as the folder name, / and we're going to use the format. So we want the zeroth element dot JPG for JPEG, and we're going to dot format this. Inside we're going to replace the 0th element with the response dot meta, and the meta is a title that we're going to pass in, and it's going to be the 0th element in that meta. Okay, so this is our set file name done. Now we need to override some other methods. So we need to override the get media method. So get underscore media underscore requests, and this is going to be take ourself because we're overriding and it's part of the class, an item, and the info. Okay, now what we need to do for each media request that we get, we need to have a for loop of the image underscore URL in item image underscore URLs, and in the for loop we're going to yield, and we're going to yield the Scrapy dot request object of the image underscore URL, and we're also going to pass in the meta. So we're going to create meta equals a dictionary of meta title, and the title is going to have the value item title. Okay, so this is getting a bit long. We'll just break it up a bit. So we're going to have the title, and then we're going to close off our dictionary, and then close off our brackets for the request. Okay, now let's define our get images function. So def get underscore images. Now this is overriding the get images function or method inside the images pipeline class. So this, we need to pass in self, we need to pass in a response, a request, and the info. Okay, so because we're overriding our superclass, what we're going to do is we're going to call the superclass function so that it will manage all of the difficulties of getting the images from the website. So for key image and buffer, so buff in super Imgur pipeline. So the superclass of Imgur pipeline self, we're going to get underscore images, and we're going to pass in the response. Oh, it's getting a bit long again. We're going to pass in the response, and we're going to pass in the request. And we're going to pass in the info that we get. Okay, so after that's done, it's going to go into our for loop, and we're going to use the key, which is the name of the file, and we're going to set it to self.set underscore file name. And the file name is going to be the response. And then after our for loop is done, we're going to yield the key, the image, and the buffer. Okay, so this completes our Imgur pipeline. So basically our get media requests will go through all of our items and get the image's URL and make a request to get that image. Then our get images method that we override will go through and use the superclass get images method to get all of the images, and then we're just going to tack onto the end and change the key before it saves to file. Okay, so we can now right quit and exit out of this. And because we changed our pipeline, we need to edit our settings. So vim settings.py. Now we need to change the image item pipelines, and instead of it being Scrapy contrib pipeline, we're going to remove it out and we're going to get it from our pipeline. So Imgur dot pipelines, so the pipelines file, and we're going to get the Imgur pipeline, and we need to set it to 1. Okay, now if we right quit and we exit out of this and we cd back up to our root directory, we can run our bot. So Scrapy crawl Imgur, and we can also use the -L to set the logging mode. So as you saw before, we have a bunch of debug outputs, and we may not want debug, so we can do info. And this will print out anything that is an info, an error, or a critical error. So if we run this, got an error. It'll be on my for loop line. Okay. So I'll just edit this quickly. I just didn't have my colon. There we go. Let's right quit, cd, and let's try running our bot again. So linfo, and it'll only output the info needed. Okay, so that'll run, and wait for it a bit as it's scrolling pages. But I'll cancel it for the moment. Keep this shorter, and we can go to our Imgur front page again, and inside our full, and you'll see that we now have a bunch of images that have the titles as their names. So we've still got the ones that we left in here from before, but we also have the ones that have their names printed out as well. So cool. So now in your own time, you could sit there and scroll through your images, and you can read the top for the title of the image. Cool. So this concludes our Imgur scraping bot. Let me know in the comments if you ever browse Imgur in your spare time. If you have any questions, leave it in the comments and I'll do my best to answer it as best as possible. The next topic we'll be looking at is searching images for metadata. Thanks for watching.